Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. I'm Tash.
I'm Bernice.
And we're not pundits.
We are just two women who know what a ruck is.
Welcome back. Happy New Year. 2026 is here with lots of amazing rugby on store. I look like I've just come off a ski slope, so I am super excited for a hot, sunny trip to Cape Town. This time next week, we will be together. Her Side of the Ruck will be together in person, and we cannot wait. We're also going to be making some content about rugby generally, as well as previewing the Stormers game against Leicester Tigers in round 4 of the Investec Champions Cup. But before that, we need your help. We need your questions. It can be anything rugby related. It could be about what your favourite jersey is, or get us to debate who's got the best jersey in the URC. It can be about rule changes in the world of rugby, or anything else. Who do you think's the best team in the world at the minute? Anything like that. I mean, it's kind of clear. I think we've got a winner on this channel. It's probably South Africa, who are the best in the world at the minute. Any questions you have, please let us know in the comments below, because we'll be filming an episode discussing that. And we really want to engage with your voice as well. That's what this channel is all about. But for now, we are going to be discussing on this episode round 3 of the Investec Champions Cup. This is a preview episode, and there are some fantastic matches happening this weekend. But before we talk about that, let's just look at the pools as they stand. Pool 1, we've got Glasgow topping the table, followed by Sarries, Toulouse, Sale Sharks, the Hollywood Bet Sharks, and Clermont. Pool 2, Bath, Castres, Munster, Toulon, Gloucester, and Edinburgh. Pool 3, the DHL Stormers, Leinster, Harlequins, La Rochelle, Leicester Tigers, and Bayonne. Pool 4, Northampton Saints, Bordeaux Begler, Bristol Bears, Scarlets, the Vodacom Bulls, and Pau. Wow. The pools are shaping up to be really quite tight, and some of the games we've got this weekend are definitely going to determine those positions. Bernice, can I just get your thoughts on the first opening 2 rounds of the Investec Champions Cup and what this competition has been like from a South African point of view?
Yeah, I think the first 2 seasons that the South African teams were in did not really go our way. We didn't really make it out of the pool stages. Some teams did, and we were kind of in and out of the Investec Champions Cup and then into the EPCR and in again in the Investec Champions Cup. So I think this is the first season in a while that all of the South African teams, okay, except for the Lions, but are in the Investec Champions Cup again. So I think it's been better for some teams, but I mean, the Stormers have been doing great, and
so well.
We've covered a lot of their matches and just on how they've been doing throughout the season. So the Stormers have been doing great, but I think it's the Bulls and the Sharks that are still kind of struggling to find their feet in the competition. And you can see that they're not only struggling in that competition, but also in the URC, but it does kind of filter over to this competition. So the Stormers being the clear standout South African team in the Investec Champions Cup this season. And I think the Sharks and the Bulls still struggling to find their feet.
I think in the EPCR generally, the Hollywood Bet Sharks have had previous success in the Challenge Cup. But in the Investec Champions Cup, it just seems to be how they're managing the travel, because being in South Africa one weekend and then being in Europe the next weekend, which is different to the URC where you have tours of Europe, that structure seems to work better, I think, for both Southern Hemisphere and European teams, to be honest, rather than the constant back and forth travel. Like the game that we're going to watch in round 4, Leicester travel out to Cape Town, probably at the top of the week, and then they're back to England, and they're playing away to Harlequins in London the following week. So there's quite a lot of travel, and typically we see a lot of rotation in the squads at this stage. But yeah, Stormers are the team that are flying, I think, generally in all competitions this season, are the ones to watch. But this weekend, I think we've got a couple of spotlight games in terms of where the positions stand, where the rivalries are in this competition. So let's just run through some of the ones that I think are the ones to watch. So Pool 2, I think there's a big fight for pride here at the bottom of the table. Edinburgh host Gloucester on the Friday night. They kick us off. And these two teams have had a real mix of seasons, which we'll get into later in the episode. But this is a pride match. Like, no, you never want to lose. You always want to win as many of your games. I think it's a silly question to ask a head coach if you think you can beat another team. But there's a lot riding on this table, this match, in terms of pride and performance. A big one on Saturday, Leinster v La Rochelle. These two teams have come across each other quite a bit. They are also coming off huge wins, both respectively in the top 14 and the URC from last weekend. It's Shark Week. You've got the Sale Sharks hosting the Hollywood Beck Sharks as well. That is going to be a cracking match. I know one you have a vested interest in. Pool one, you've got Saracens. They host Toulouse. I think this could be a fantastic one in terms of where the positions stand with Glasgow Warriors ahead of Pool one, which I'm personally very happy about. And then finally, I think the match for the weekend for me is Bordeaux hosting Northampton Saints in what is a replay of 24-25's Investec Champions Cup final and a battle for top spot in their pool. Plenty of other games going on this weekend, but for me, I feel like those are the games that are going to capture everyone's attention.
Yeah, I think the game to watch will definitely be Bordeaux against Northampton Saints. I remember watching that final last year and I was glued to my seat as a neutral. That was just insane. And we've spoken about how the semi-finals and the quarterfinals were they almost took the spotlight in the last two
Mm,
seasons of across majority of the competitions. But I think
hmm
that was one final that really stood out and a final that you really went like, okay, that is memorable. And I think just also looking at how Northampton performed in the semi-final going into that final, it was such a like you just knew it was going to be a humdinger. And I think they were tied at halftime, so that is what
Yeah.
made it so much more interesting to watch the match. But yeah, I think that will definitely be the match to watch out for. I'm obviously personally very excited about Shark Week. So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, we'll also see how the rest of the Hemisphere teams perform, such as the Bulls
Mm.
and the Stormers, going to be interesting. But yeah, I think the matches that you mentioned are going to be the ones to watch.
Shall we start with Shark Week? Because I think there's quite a lot
Let's
riding on
do.
this for both teams. The Sharks, whichever Sharks team you select, are both having very interesting seasons in their respective domestic competitions. So Sale Sharks are kind of in this no man's land at the minute in the Gallagher Prem. They're so many points ahead of Harlequins, who are in eighth place, and Sale Sharks are in seventh place. But they're too far away from Saracens, who are in sixth place. So they're kind of in this no man's land where, at this point in time, they could really push and try and get into the top four of the Gallagher Prem to get into that semi final. And Sale Sharks in the past have been very successful at making it into the knockouts and then just falling short at the final hurdle. They've not been super successful with silverware, where you've got the Hollywood Bet Sharks have been successful in the EPCR, but in a similar sense that the Hollywood Bet Sharks have got to the knockout stages in the URC and then fallen at the final few hurdles. So I actually think these are two teams that have got quite a very similar in terms of their recent history, in terms of record success, how they can perform against other teams, and almost the styles of rugby that they play. I think you look at the players in both teams, like Sale Sharks have the likes of the Curry brothers, Ben Curry and Tom Curry, George Ford, who I highly rate at fly half. You've also got Asher Apoko Fajour, who was an up and coming forward prop for England and for the Northwest side. But then the Hollywood Beck Sharks, you've got Grant Williams, Ethan Hooker, Sia Khaleesi, despite him announcing his move to Cape Town after the end of this season. But on both sides, you've got a hell of a lot of talent. So what is going to happen in this game? Because I think there's a lot on the line in Shark Week.
A lot on the line and a lot of anticipation. I think both teams, there's this rivalry around Shark Week. You know, a lot of the clubs, staff and players have thrown around this banter around Shark Week, and Masoti have also made a few comments, you know, saying there's only one shark and, you know, it's not Sale. So yeah, I think it's a nice rivalry, especially the Dupria brothers that have played for the Sharks now they're at Sale. So I think
Mm,
there's a lot of interesting matchups and there's a lot of players, you know, or there are a few players that have played for the Sharks that are now playing for Sale. But yeah, I think if you look at both teams, they have such talented players in the teams, and they have X
Mm,
factor players in both of the sides, which really balances this match out. And it's so difficult to say who's, definitely going to take the win on this one. And I think
mm,
especially if you look at both of their seasons, Sale is ranked fourth in their pool, Sharks are ranked fifth. So none of them is having a particularly great season
mm,
in either of the competitions. And I think the Sharks coming from a loss against the Lions, a narrow loss in the URC, but it was kind of like two steps forward, one step forward, two steps back.
mm.
So I think they are still in a very weird space, still trying to find their feet with their new head coach, JB Peterson, and a lot of the key players and the senior players that didn't really have such a great game last weekend, and some decisions they could have handled better or made better decisions. So I think decision making in this match will be crucial, and also
Mm.
just kind of doing the small things right. And I think that will go for both teams.
I 100% agree with you because Sale have also come off a narrow loss to Bristol in the
Mm,
Gallagher Prem last weekend. This will be a game of fine margins and also about the penalty count. If you can keep, a respective side can keep their penalty count low, I think they will be the team that will capitalise and win this match
mm,
because where they are, both are in the pools, in their domestic respective leagues, it's been a tough season. For what, regardless of what type of
mm.
Sharks fan you are, it has
Yeah.
been a tough season because both have gone
Yeah.
through transition periods and there's been lots of changes up at Sale. And I think this could be Sale have one of the best defenses, I think, in the Gallagher Prem, which is why you don't often see super high scoring games up there. Like Bristol, for example, are a team who love to throw the ball around and they only won
Mm,
1917. That's not a particularly high scoring game for a league like the Gallagher Prem
mm,
or even the URC, for example. And a 1 point loss to the Lions last weekend in the URC for the Hollywood Bet Sharks, I think is a tough pill to swallow. But do you almost want to come off something that was so close where you could have just won it, thinking
mm.
that there's a lot of learnings from that match that we can take into this week? Because I think for both teams, getting into the round of 16 of this competition is probably their best opportunity to show what they've got in the tank for this season. Because I think where you look at where they both are in the tables, with the URC, it's a bit different because it's a longer league. There's so much can happen depending on who wins and loses. But the Gallagher Prem now, I
Mm.
feel like the top four are slowly running away with it. Leicester Tigers is still kind of in reach. Saris could come back. But the game against Leicester and Saris this weekend was very much a determination game of who stays with the top four pack and who starts to fall away. And then Sale's even further away from that. So I feel like for the South African Sharks, there's almost a bigger opportunity to progress further in the URC if they can really turn it around. As with Sale, this means a lot because there isn't much, I don't think, in the Gallagher Prem for them to. I don't. It's tough to say it in January. Do you know what I'm saying about a league? Like, there's not enough to fight for because a lot can change in a couple of months. But with the Gallagher Prem is a lot shorter of a competition compared to the URC. And I think for Sale, there's probably more riding on this than the Hollywood Bet Sharks in terms of competition. But saying that, it will have equal importance to both teams. Friday Night Lights, Edinburgh host Gloucester. Edinburgh come off a 1 point win over Benetton. I think they clutched that win in the end. And Gloucester are really struggling domestically in the Gallagher Prem. They lost to the Newcastle Red Bulls last weekend. Now, the Red Bulls, since Red Bull have come into Newcastle, they've put a lot more money. We're seeing a big transition. I think in the northeast of England, that team could be a powerhouse in the next 3 to 4 years after what has been a really rough 7 to 8 years of being a Newcastle fan. But Gloucester, all teams go through the motions, right? And Gloucester are going through their motions at the minute, as I would say, alongside Harlequins. Those are two English teams who have very strong fan bases, who have a great rugby history, who are struggling at the moment. So, and both Edinburgh and Gloucester are at the bottom of the table with this. Edinburgh really fluctuate with their performances in the URC, and they sometimes play absolutely brilliant rugby. Sometimes they just clutch a win. Sometimes they narrowly lose a win. And then other times they've put huge performances on teams like them beating Toulon at home. in the earlier rounds was so impressive. Where is that Edinburgh consistently? And I think it's something that the fans get frustrated with. So then you've got two teams who are going through the motions in slightly different ways, with two fan bases who are incredibly passionate and are probably a little bit frustrated because Gloucester aren't finding any form of consistency in terms of winning at the minute, and Edinburgh are fluctuating with that winning consistency. I think it'll be a close one, but I'm going to back Edinburgh on this occasion because Gloucester really just seem like they're not having the greatest of seasons, and that happens with every rugby club. But they've got some really good young players there, but I think they are missing a lot of experience. And despite Edinburgh having a lot of injuries, I think they've still got enough players in at the minute to execute a plan and secure a win.
I think inconsistency is probably the best words to describe these two teams at the minute. I think Edinburgh reminds me a lot of the Lions if I look at the Southern Hemisphere team. So the
Mm.
Sharks haven't, the Sharks, South African Sharks, haven't been that inconsistent. They've been consistently losing. Whereas the Lions were more, they'll get a win over a massive team, but then they'll lose to a side like Benetton, which I'm not
Yeah.
disregarding Benetton as a team, but that
Mm.
is kind of what Edinburgh reminds me of. Because as you've mentioned, they had that great win over Toulon and then they just edged Benetton. So they're very inconsistent, I feel like, in both competitions. They are back into the Champions Cup after a long absence in the Champions Cup, which is good.
Mm.
But yeah, I just think where they are at the minute is very difficult space for them as well as Gloucester. I don't
Mm.
think either one of those teams are having the greatest season. So it's very tough. I also feel like these teams are familiar opponents with one another. They faced each other in the EPCR, and
Mm.
Gloucester have actually edged wins with very small margins. But I do think Edinburgh will win. I think it will be very small margin, maybe 3 or 5 points. But I also agree on that. I think Edinburgh will win the match.
This game can go one of two ways. It's either going to be really clunky, loads of knock-ons, loads of mistakes, low scoring. Because when I've watched Gloucester play this
Mm,
season and Edinburgh play this season, I'm talking the 1872 Cup in both
mm,
legs, and when Gloucester went to Leicester Tigers, I was at that match pre-Christmas. They're both own worst enemies on both occasions. So it's going to be the team that can be stronger on that occasion and not make so many unforced errors. That's one prediction. The other prediction is
mm,
we're going to see some amazing tries because if you've got Darcy Graham starting on the wing for Edinburgh, if you've got people like the Atkinsons,
mm,
Ollie Thorley for Gloucester, both teams have young, spicy backline players. If we see that kind of rugby and
mm,
fewer knock-ons, because it's going to be the knock-ons and then going to the set piece that makes the game slower on this occasion. I love a bit of a set piece. I love a scrum. I love a line out. But I think for these two teams prefer it when they're
mm,
using their backline players to score. So I think it could either go one of two ways.
mm.
So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens if we're either going to have a very kind of slow, kind of clunky game, or whether we're going to have fast flowing rugby and amazing tries. I personally think this is quite a difficult game to predict in terms of a score line because of how much Edinburgh fluctuated so much. Like it could be really high
Mm.
scoring to Edinburgh, or it could be really, really close, or Gloucester could come out with an absolute belter and surprise everybody. So, definitely one to watch in terms of pride in what it could offer to fans. And it will either offer a glimpse of hope to Gloucester fans, or it will offer light to Edinburgh fans in the sense of we're getting more consistent with our performances. Those are going to be the outcomes for me. Oh, biggie on Saturday. Leinster v La Rochelle. These are two huge teams with very strong records in this competition. two teams who have also faced each other quite a lot because Leinster, La Rochelle, and Leicester Tigers all seem to be drawn in the same pool every single year. Like I've watched this competition since I became a Tigers fan about 10 years ago. And every time we have the draw, regardless of what evolution the Champions Cup has been in, whether it was the Heineken Cup, now it's the Investec Champions Cup, those three teams always seem to draw each other. So Leinster and La Rochelle have played each other quite a lot. But these two kind of kings of Europe teams have both shown themselves to be weaker than they have been in previous seasons. I feel like they're having quite similar domestic league campaigns. They're both kind of middling the top 14 and the URC. This is probably the worst positioning we've seen Leinster in the URC literally ever. Since the rebrand from the Pro 14 to the URC, Leinster have typically been first for the majority of the season, first, second, or third, but they've not been fifth. They've been kind of lingering between fifth and sixth for the past few weeks and had the most losses that they've pretty much ever had in the URC just in this season alone. I feel like the top 14 is such a competitive league. I don't watch it enough as much as I should do, but each year you get a team that kind of comes on top. I mean, Toulouse are just running away with it at the minute, despite coming off a loss, but they're at the top of the table. La Rochelle are seventh in the top 14, but they're both coming off very big wins from their respective domestic competitions, like huge score lines, like a points difference of about 40 points each. I think La Rochelle could destroy Leinster up front. I genuinely do. But that is only if they pick like the likes of Will Skelton, if he's fit, if he's playing. We saw the impact he had when he was in the Wallabies side against the British and Irish Lions. And not being funny, most of the British and Irish Lions players play at Leinster. So I think if he's selected, that could be huge. I also think if Uini Atonio, sorry if I got that wrong, is playing in the front row, he is probably one of the biggest forwards that I have ever seen in my entire life. This guy is a unit, if like that's the best way to describe him. But he returned from an injury in December 2025. So if we see him play in the forward pack for La Rochelle, I think that is a huge threat to Leinster. What Leinster have been doing this season is starting slow and then finishing strong in both competitions. We've seen that in the past two rounds of the Investec Champions Cup, and we've been seeing that when you look at the halftime score of Leinster when they've won matches in the URC, they might be down or it might be close at halftime, but they go on to win the match. The one exception is the game that they played against Munster recently in the festive period, which is a pretty low scoring game, but they came out on top. If Leinster get the ball out to the likes of O'Brien and Lowe and use their centres and can just keep La Rochelle neutral in the scrum, I think they'll have a good chance at winning.
I feel like when you said since you've been watching this competition, when it was the Heineken Cup, now the Investec Champions Cup, those three sides have always been drawn together in a pool. So Leicester, Leinster, La Rochelle. And I have been watching matches here and there in some of the seasons. And I feel like every time that I watch a match, it is Leinster versus La Rochelle. I don't know, just somehow
It always
I
happens.
feel like it's always Leinster versus La Rochelle. So these two teams have met a lot in finals, in semi-finals, and those matches have been great to watch as a neutral
Yeah,
because you don't really
absolutely.
pick a side, but then you watch the match and it's an absolute belter. To me, I think both teams have very good forwards, both teams have very good
Mm,
backs. I do think that if La Rochelle go with their stronger side, like the likes of Will Skelton, etc., I do think La Rochelle can win Leinster on the day. I will be backing La Rochelle, and I think Leinster are probably the favorites going into this match.
yes.
But yeah, I really have to back La Rochelle. But yeah, so I am backing La Rochelle to take this win.
Mm.
I'm not going to give predictions of by how many I think they'll win. I do, as I've mentioned, I think Leinster are the favorites going into this match. But I think if La Rochelle use their players right and they front up physically like they can, I do think they can win.
Look, I'm a Leicester fan, if you didn't know, and both of these teams have both beaten Leicester in the first two rounds. So, but Leicester sent a younger side away to France to play La Rochelle and put out a pretty full strength team, given where Leicester were with the injuries at the start of December, start to the middle of December. Like they were missing Emeka and Leone, a lot of other back row injuries, for example. So, but one of the tries that lives in my head rent free. I made a video about it on TikTok. Adam Radwan, the kick chase. Oh my God, that man. Yeah, I'm an Adam Radwan fan, that's for sure. But that game at Mattioli Woods, Welford Road, Leicester started slowly, but then their experience really came through in that. I think La Rochelle have got a different squad to what they've had in previous years, but still have, when they've got their big boys in, they've got that big pack. And that has always been the La Rochelle identity. But when they went away to the Stormers, they kind of rotated. They had a younger squad. They were playing more heads up rugby, fast flowing rugby, using their back line a little bit more. Did score a couple of tries from short range, which again, I think that is very much the La Rochelle identity. So we're seeing two teams who have played each other quite a lot, who are having different experiences in their domestic leagues, who can both be competitive up front. But I just think La Rochelle have the edge up front. But I think Leinster overall have the greater level of experience. So is it going to be power or experience that wins on this occasion? I also don't want to offer any predictions because honestly, this game could go either way. I think Leinster have been more successful in most recent clashes, but Leinster have been the team to beat. Like it this season, they've kind of dropped off a little bit, but we've spoken about it on our episodes of the URC. In previous seasons, no one could beat them. They were absolutely unstoppable. And I feel like this year there's been a bit of a chink in the armour, which I think La Rochelle will really go for. Just as we had Shark Week, we've also got the battle of the Willis brothers in Saracens versus Toulouse, with Jack Willis at Toulouse in the back row and Tom Willis in the back row for the English side of Saracens. Toulouse was shocked in round two against Glasgow at Scotstoun Stadium, to my delight, but probably not to the delight of French fans. Sarries can be ruthless at home. They've put 60 points on Bristol earlier in the season in the Gallagher Prem, but they've also not strung together a fantastic recent performance against Leicester Tigers. Again, I'm not upset about that on a personal point of view, but you look at where Sarries are as a team and their identity. They've brought some of their old identity back with Owen Farrell, although he didn't start at the weekend. I'd be interested to see if he starts for this fixture at the Stonex. Both teams have incredibly vocal, passionate, and committed fan bases. So I think we'll see the Stonex absolutely packed out this weekend. Sarries at home are a difficult contest, particularly the Stonex being it's a 3G pitch and given how cold it is in the UK at the minute. I think Saturday's supposed to be fairly reasonable at 4 or 5 degrees. I know some of you who are watching this in the Southern Hemisphere right now might be thinking, what the heck? But I woke up yesterday and it was -6 in London. So that was just ridiculous for England. Like, what on earth are these temperatures? So if you've got a really solid 3G pitch, that changes everything in terms of kicking game, how you can scrummage, how you tackle, how you recover from getting up from the ground, all that kind of stuff. Both of these teams have been so successful in the past. These are two of the greatest teams in Europe in terms of their history, with Toulouse having a bit more recent success overall in terms of Saracens, but Saracens were the dominant team in the 2010s. These are two big names in the world of rugby coming up against each other. I do think both teams have been bruised in the past, in the last week, and also so far in this competition. So Saracens sent out a fairly strong team to play the Hollywood Bet Sharks in the last round, and Toulouse lost to Glasgow. Both of these teams are also coming off losses in both of their respective leagues. Sarries lost to Leicester, Toulouse lost to Perpignan by 3 points in the top 14. So there's a lot on the line for this game.
There is, and I think it's interesting to look at the history between the two sides. So in the last four clashes, they both had 2 wins each. So it's so much in the balance. And both of them have one win, sorry, and one loss in
Mm.
this season. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I think the Stonex will be packed. And like you said, the weather's not too bad, even though for us it's terribly cold. But yeah, so the weather not being too bad. I think Toulouse have generally just done so well in this competition and
They have.
especially over the last few seasons. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I am looking forward to this match as well, just seeing how the last results went, as you've mentioned, both coming from losses. So they're both probably very hungry for that win. And Saracens also losing to the Sharks here in South Africa. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think Toulouse will take it.
I agree with you. I think Toulouse will win. I think in terms of the penalty count, again, will be crucial for this one because you've
Yeah.
got great kickers like Thomas Ramos
Mm.
he does not miss that bloke. He has been
Yeah.
so impressive for club and country. He was a standout performer in the Autumn Nations series for France. Fergus Burke, a young Scottish fly half, he has been really impressive at club level, and I think we could see him become the successor of that 10 jersey for Scotland in the coming years. So any opportunity for points, I think both of these teams will take because Glasgow are playing Clermont at the weekend, and Clermont are at the bottom of
Mhm.
their pool, and I just think Glasgow are going to top their pool, which is fantastic and not been done before for a Scottish team in recent history, to my recollection. So it will be. There's a lot on the line with this in terms of where the table standings. Let's say Saracens win and Toulouse are third in the table. How gutted would you be if you're a team that's come at the top of your pool and then in round of 16 you get drawn to lose? Or you're second in your pool thinking, oh, we've clutched it, we've managed to do as well as we can, and then you play to lose. That would be your worst nightmare. So I think a lot of teams would be hoping for Toulouse to win on this occasion because
Mhm.
they don't want, well, it depending on where you're standing and depending on what fixtures
Mhm.
you have this weekend, there will be teams that are rooting for one side and the other side. But I personally don't see Toulouse losing this one. I think on average they have been more consistent. They're at the top of the top 14. That for a reason. The top 14 is a fantastic league, incredibly competitive. Sarries are sixth. Sarries have found a bit like Edinburgh, maybe in the URC. They've put
Mhm.
huge results on some teams, lost when they shouldn't have lost, or and then also put a play had good performances or started slow and then finished strong. So they're kind of an amalgamation of what Edinburgh and Leinster have done in the URC, if I'm going to describe it to fans who don't watch the Gallagher Prem. So I also Sarries are quite a close rival to Leicester. So despite Toulouse did put 80 points on Leicester Tigers last year, which are another team that Leicester always seem to draw. But on this occasion, I am going to be supporting Toulouse to win, and I do think they will win in this competition. But in the back row, the Willis brother battle, I think Jack Willis has improved massively since he left England. Like he had a tough time with what happened at Wasps,
Mhm.
and I think Tom Willis's decision to move to France next season, he signed for Bordeaux, I think has also been spurred on by some of the things that have happened at club and country. So, and it makes sense. Okay, they're not going to be at the same club next season, but if your brother's having a fantastic time in France, you kind of look at it and go, why don't I go as well? So, but he's got a job to do for Saracens in the meantime.
Mhm.
That will be a big battle, Jack Willis versus Tom Willis, because both of these back rows are phenomenal. It will be an interesting clash, to say the least. I feel like round 3 and 4 is when the Investec Champions Cup gets really juicy. The first rounds, you've kind of got big score lines. There's quite a lot of disparity between a lot of different teams. And then you think, yeah, that team's going to win. Oh, it's kind of predictable where certain teams will come. And then round 2, the shock result was Glasgow v Toulouse, in my opinion. And then round 3, because of shock results like that, you think this is when it starts to get juicy. And I think Saracens v Toulouse is definitely a match to watch this weekend. But for me, the game of the weekend is Bordeaux Begler versus Northampton Saints. You touched on it at the top of the show, Bernice, about the style of these two teams and the final last year. What are your thoughts ahead of this fixture on Sunday?
I think Bordeaux is really that French team that plays the typical French rugby, that French play.
100%.
And they also have players like Penaud and Jalibert, which like you hate them as a South African, but I also feel like as a neutral, you just in awe of the type of rugby that they play.
Yeah.
I remember when Bordeaux played the Sharks in last season's Investec Champions Cup. Penaud scored 6 tries. Bordeaux scored 10 tries, but Penaud scored 6 of the 10 tries. And that was
Mm,
just insane. And some of it individual, some of it team tries, but he's
yeah.
an insane rugby player. And he's just
Mm,
one of those players that you can't look past it. He's a really good rugby player. But
mm,
nonetheless, I think, yeah, Bordeaux just plays that typical French flair rugby. And you also saw them with a very good win over the Bulls here in South Africa, which is also very
mm,
difficult to get. I mean, you play at altitude and you
absolutely.
just kind of saw the championship mentality. I feel
Mm,
like the experience and them knowing how to handle pressure came through in that match. Whereas
mm,
Northampton is also having a very good season, just
very
as they
good.
did last year. So both of them have 2 wins at the minute. And I think Bordeaux's really playing like defending champs. And Northampton also with a very big win over the Bulls, which they made it look so easy.
Mm,
In the second half, I think the halftime score was 14-5, and they put 50 points up against the Bulls and they made it
that
look
was a
really easy at some point.
that was an insane scoreline.
Yeah, and Henry Pollock was just a standout player in that match as well. And we talk about him so much here on the pod, but I remember that match specifically, and he's run almost like across the whole field to the try line. And then passing, and I can't remember who scored, but it was just a brilliant move. But I think this is going to be a very, very interesting match, and I'm almost too scared to pick a winner because I really want it to be super tight and I want it to be the close match that it was in the final. But I think for Bordeaux, they have really good momentum. They they really know how to grind it out in tight matches, which I think
Yeah, they
it's
do.
a characteristic of a championship team. But Bordeaux have just gone like this. Like they have been so consistent over the last two
Mm,
seasons, which is what you really want to see in a team.
mm,
And I think for them, scrums are going to be crucial. The driving mauls are going to be crucial. And just, I think overall game management for both teams are going to be crucial. You touched on discipline and penalties, and I think in this game as well, this is going to be an aspect where both teams are going to have to be very disciplined, take points if you need to. I also think we're going to see a good running rugby and good attacking
oh
play
yeah.
because both teams have such good players in their back lines.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts? I can't wait.
I think this is the game of the weekend for me. It absolutely is, not just because of the recent history,
Mm,
but because of the style of play of both teams. I
mm,
just want to look at some of the recent form. Looking at the table, first of all, there's only points difference separating these two teams. If both teams have won bonus point wins twice over in this competition so far, so that's a statement of intent if there was one. Saints are coming off a very successful festive period in the Gallagher Prem. There was a lot of chat in the media when they went to Bath Rugby to play at the Rec, where people were saying, "Oh, Saints have sent a second team. We're going to walk all over them," and Saints absolutely pulled a blinder. They pulled a huge blinder on the recent Gallagher Prem winners, and I'll put a couple of tries on the screen for you to see. The ref didn't seem to be on Saints' side by overruling a lot of tries in that match and going to the TMO. And both Henry Pollock and Tommy Freeman do the TMO check celebration, which I thought was absolutely iconic as a neutral because Bath and Saints are both big rivals to Leicester Tigers. So for me watching this,
mm,
I was really impressed by that match. Then last weekend, Northampton Saints beat Harlequins at home. Now, they beat them quite comfortably. And I have to caveat this by saying Quins are going through quite a tough time in terms
Mm.
of where they are as a club at the minute. Their CEO, Laurie Dalrymple, was interviewed by the Times journalists on a podcast called The Ruck. I highly recommend listening to that episode actually, because Laurie spoke very candidly about where Harlequins are as a side and how their program has been and what isn't working and what they're doing to improve, because Quins have been a very successful team in the past in terms of reaching semi-finals of the Investec Champions Cup, of getting a little bit of silverware in the past 10 years, but they just seem to be going through the motions at the minute. There were glimpses of good things for Quins against Northampton, but Northampton just showed how good they were. I think it was one of their biggest records against Harlequins ever in the history of the English League. So Saints are coming off two very good wins, I would say, overall, as a neutral looking at it. Bordeaux have one win, one loss in their last two fixtures. So then the favour is this. Then you kind of favour Northampton on that in terms of their winning run, but it will be the minutiae
Mm.
in this game. I completely agree with you, and I think you make an excellent point about the running rugby, about Penaud especially. I mean, when you look at the Autumn Nation series when France played the Springboks, it was Penaud who got those points before South Africa kind of ran away with it in those final 10 minutes. He is a standout performer. You also have Louis Biel-Barré for Bordeaux. These are two of the best backline players in the world. Now, at Northampton, big names. Pollock, Finn Smith, Alex Mitchell, Tommy Freeman. I'd be interested to see if Tommy Freeman starts in the centres or on the wing this weekend, because I thought he played excellently in the centres at Bath. And he has expressed wanting to transition from the wing to the centres, which I think in terms of a long-term career, particularly with the England shirt, I think that's the right thing, because England are sport for choice for wingers at the minute. So I feel like the back line play is going to be majestic. Where it will come down to is, as you mentioned, game management. I think that was a fantastic point, because, and not just the game management of when you bring your substitutions on, etc., but also the emotion, managing the emotions. Saints got their emotions right when they played Leinster in the Investec Champions Cup semi-final last season. I don't think they got it right, amongst other things, in the final against Bordeaux last year. They put out a full strength team the week before in the Gallagher Prem as like a test run and got a couple of injuries. Emotions were high leading up to that match. And I just think on the day, Bordeaux managed it better as a team, as a coaching squad, as a member of staff. Like, the French side managed it a lot better compared to Saints. I think Saints will have learned a lot from that loss. Often you learn more by losing in those big moments compared to winning. Like Bath Rugby lost to Northampton Saints 2 years ago in the Premiership final. They went on to win it a year later. And Saints had a really, apart from the Champions Cup, they had a really great run in the Champions Cup last year, but they had an awful year in the league. They were what, eighth? And Leicester nilled them at Franklin's Gardens, which was amazing from my point of view as our local rivals, but really poor if you're a Saints fan. So all of those moments you think contribute to games like this. This is such a huge game for several reasons. For pride, for seeing where both teams are in the season, and for clutching that top spot, because whoever wins, no one is touching them at first place, I don't think, in that pool.
I think this is definitely going to be the game of the weekend. And it's so difficult because I think there's a lot of people that expect Bordeaux to win, but I also think there's a lot of people that would expect Northampton to win just based
Mm,
off what you've said, the history, how both teams have been performing. I don't necessarily know what an upset would look like in this match, but
yeah.
I'm kind of going of, okay, people would probably expect Bordeaux to win, and then if Northampton win, it will be an upset. But if Northampton wins and Bordeaux loses, like that's also kind of an upset. So I actually don't quite know. But
No,
yeah,
neither.
I think Bordeaux will probably edge it. But again, if an upset would look like Northampton winning Bordeaux, then I'm all for it.
For sure. What I will predict is I think it will be a high scoring game. I think
Yeah.
both teams will get bonus point tries. I think we'll see a lot of fast flowing rugby. Just when you look at the players in both of these teams, like, yeah, the set piece is important, but Northampton aren't a big forward pack team. They have a decent pack. And yeah, a lot of their structures are based around their pack, but a lot of their structures is getting the ball out quickly out to the back line. And Bordeaux are similar. They play with that quick pace. And as you say, that traditional French flair, that style of rugby, like some of Bordeaux's shapes, I think could translate very easily to what are the shapes at France, in a similar way to when you look at how Scotland play when you've got a lot of Glasgow Warriors in the team. There's a lot of similarities between what the attacking shapes look like, despite there being different coaches, different nuances, and different changes of tactics from club to country. This is exciting. This is such an exciting weekend of rugby. And it only makes me more excited because I wonder where it will set us in the standing when we meet up in South Africa and create loads of content and enjoy a bit. For me, winter sun; for you, summer sun. And round three is where it gets juicy in the Investec Champions Cup, and round 4 is when a lot is on the line. Right, that's all for now on her side of the Ruck. Those are our spotlight games that we've discussed to preview in the Investec Champions Cup this weekend. There are, of course, plenty more. We are spoilt for choice for the weekend. Some of you may have multiple screens watching all the games at the time. Let us know what games you'll be watching and what you're excited for this weekend, as well as your rugby questions that we'll be answering in due course. But for now, thank you so much for watching another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. Signing off is me, Tash, in the UK.
Signing off is me, Bernice, in South Africa.
See you next time. Bye.